The meeting recording has begun. If you would like to locate the ribbon at the top of the Teams window or near the top of the Teams window, you can click on the dismiss button to make that ribbon go away and utilize all of your screen.
Mardell,
Yes.
can you post in the Skype, the chat there, the instructions to do the closed captioning?
Oh, one moment, please.
Thanks. Did you see them? I put them, wanted to confirm they were correct.
I have one available if you'd like me to put it there.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yep. Come on. Hurry up.
I want to welcome everyone today. This is our third virtual public collaborative town hall meeting. And can you see my screen? Tisha?
No, I cannot.
Okay.
I can't.
I did see it for a minute there, so.
Okay. Try again. How's that? No? Yes? All right, we'll just use voice. As we wanted to start on time, it's 12:01, and we're using a new platform, as everyone realized. It's the Teams platform, and want to make sure that everyone has a chance to get their technical difficulties squared away. And while we're doing that, I'd appreciate if everyone would type their name and their affiliation in the meeting chat so we know who you are. I'll be introducing the team for the Reyes Peak Forest Health and Fuels Reduction Project soon. But I want to make sure I understand who's on. We can only see initials, so we don't know who you are. Whereas with Adobe Connect, we could see your names, and when you were giving us chat names, we would know who you are. So I'd appreciate if you put your name in the meeting chat. And that is the little, in the ribbon, there's a ribbon in the middle of your screen. And there's a little piece of paper. Looks like a little bubble with a piece of paper. So if you click that, you can see the window and you can type your name in there. So thank you, Wendy. I see Wendy and Rick and Beth. Appreciate it.
If you are having problems in the team meeting, if you disconnect from your VPN, it will streamline that. You don't have to be connected to VPN to use Teams. you'll get a slight pause and then be able to rejoin the meeting.
And please keep in mind, we do have folks that are calling in via conference line only, so their phone numbers are showing up, but not their names.
All right, great. Well, while that's happening, I want to welcome everyone to this Reyes Peak Forest Health and Fuels Reduction Project. This is the third virtual public collaborative town hall meeting. My name's Catherine Warren. I am the interdisciplinary team leader for the project. I'm here with Greg Thompson, the forest project lead, and Karina Gutierrez, the responsible official, and our interdisciplinary team. I will introduce the team in a little bit. Our responsible official, Karina, you saw Karina and Greg, is new to the forest this year, although not new to the Forest Service, and will be kicking us off today. Ranger Gutierrez will explain the process for the town hall meeting. Thank you, Ranger Gutierrez. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in this virtual setting. So let me first just kick us off by just reviewing why we're here. So the purpose of the virtual meeting today is to engage with all of you in a collaborative process surrounding the proposed Reyes Peak Forest Health and Fields Reduction Project. We're gathered in this virtual setting as a method to manage risk of exposure during this COVID-19 pandemic. You'll notice that this is a new platform. We have heard from all of you some of the concerns and challenges with our previous Adobe Connect platform. So given with any technology, there's no such thing as perfect, but we do intend on, if we do run into any challenges today, please know that our intention is to continue to collaborate with all of you, even after these virtual meetings. We do recognize that this is the third virtual public meeting and some parties joining us today. This will be the first time. So we're going to go ahead and get started today with providing a brief overview of the proposed project. After that, we're going to be opening it up for phone and video discussion. All of the folks on the phone will be able to have full audio of folks that are talking and presenting over the video. So I do want to challenge you guys today. If you are, talking or you have any comments or questions to provide, please turn on your cameras, turn on your microphone so we could just engage in more collaborative dialogue. I will ask though that we do remain courteous and respectful of others. We're all here today due to the love and respect that we have for the forest and wanting the best for the land and the communities. Through thoughtful dialogue, I'm confident that at the conclusion of today's meeting, we will have more feedback to better shape this project. It doesn't end here. As I mentioned earlier, this is a process. This is a collaborative process which continues beyond these meetings. So please continue to engage with us, and we will continue to engage with you. If we're not able to get to all comments by the end of today's meeting, please know that we'll be providing all the information on our project page, which is linked through our Los Padres website. We're also going to be including a copy of today's transcript, and you'll be able to find transcripts for past meetings on our site. Thank you again for joining us today and for helping us take care of our lands.
All right, thank you. I'm going to bring up a slide here. Can you see the slide? Anybody?
Yes.
Great,
Yes.
thank you. All right. So much of this was mentioned, audio and video. Here, this is the new platform with Teams. Again, I'm Catherine Warren. The goal of this third virtual meeting is town hall discussion, the proposed project collaboratively and virtually under COVID-19. We'll have a welcome and introduction. We're kind of in that section now. Overview of the project. and then the discussion. Want to remember to be courteous, and then we're asking to keep your camera off and your speaker muted, your mic muted when you're not speaking, but when you are, please turn your camera on and your mic on. And of course, it works best if we have one person speaking at a time. And then I like to show the web addresses. I think most of you on the call today have been to the sites numerous times, the Los Padres site, where there's a feature article and some Q&As, questions that have been raised and answers there, as well as on the left, you can see the land management project area. That's where there's information specifically about the proposal. There's maps there, lots of information, the proposals there, and I'm sure you've been there and looked at it. I want to introduce the team. So if folks can turn on their cameras on the interdisciplinary team, that would be great. And as they're turning on their cameras, we have Tracy Buells, our specialist for fuels and fire. She's unfortunately on a fire because we're at level 4 now. And often we have folks off on fires at this time of the year, as you all know. So Tracy's not with us today, and then Craig, our GIS specialist, he's not either. And he is on a fire as well. We have Chad Hermendorfer, he's our watershed and soils. Caleb Henneke, cultural. Nicole Hills for scenery.
Why don't you just told me to give him cash? Whatever you want. I'd rather give them $5 cash tip.
Hey, this is just a reminder, if you're not speaking, please go ahead and mute your microphone.
And then Nicole Hill with scenery, Tom Lowell, silviculture, Catherine Malengo, wildlife, Amy Oakes, who's not on camera right now, she is our content analysis, Tisha Street behind the scenes facilitation, and our botanist Christine West is coming off a detail next week, so she'll be back next week. All right, thanks team. You can turn your cameras off. Appreciate that. I am trying to share here. There we go. All right. I'll have to ask each time. Can you see the map, the project area?
Yes.
Great. All right. So many of you know the primary goal of this project. This is, you can see the blue outline there. That's the project area on the Los Padres National Forest. Is to promote forest health and resilience to, for drought, insect disease, and wildfire by reducing tree densities. To achieve this goal, forest managers are proposing to selectively thin specific areas across this 755-acre area surrounded in blue line there on Pine Mountain between California Highway 33 and Reyes Peak in Ventura County. The purpose of the project is to improve wildlife habitat and forest health by thinning surface and ladder fuels to reduce potential fire intensities and create landscapes more resilient to the impacts of drought, insects and disease, and wildfire in an area at risk for substantial tree mortality. The project lays within a federally designated insect and disease treatment area where declining forest health conditions have put the area at risk for substantial tree mortality over the next 15 years. You can see the project boundary, like I mentioned. The roadless areas are in the hashed green, and the wilderness area is a dotted line with the pinkish border. So a key driver in our projects are laws, regulations, and policies. Specific to this proposal, Congress has passed the Healthy Forest Restoration Act. often referred to as HEFRA, and the Federal Land Assistance Management and Enhancement Act, often referred to as a FLAME Act. The National Fire Plan, the National Fire Plan and the Los Padres National Forest Land and Resource Management Plan are also key, as are many others. Some of these you may know, including the National Forest Management Act, NIFMA, the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, the Clean Water Act, CWA, the Endangered Species Act, ESA, and the National Historic Preservation Act, NHPA, along with numerous executive orders. Some you may be familiar with, such as Executive Order 11988 for the protection of floodplains, or possibly 11990 for protection of wetlands. So forest plan direction. The Los Padres Forest Plan direction comes from the National and Rangeland Renewable Resources Planning Act, as amended by, as mentioned before, the National Forest Management Act, or NIFMA. And it establishes a process for developing, amending, and revising land management plans for national forests. The forest plan direction is to implement vegetation management activities to reduce tree densities and fuel loading, restore species composition, including increasing relative abundance of large diameter shade-intolerant conifer species. Also removing ladder fuels and forest floor accumulations, thinning conifer stands, helping to reduce habitat loss from high-intensity fires, managing critical biological land use zones, and maintaining existing roadside fuel breaks and fuel breaks along watershed boundaries to minimize fire size and the number of communities threatened by both fires and floods. And as I mentioned, Tracy Buell, our fuel specialist, is on a fire. And I normally have her work this slide, but I'll give you an overview of this. You can see in the middle, the blue area, that is where the project lies. And you can see it's surrounded by numerous fires. And fire has defined and shaped vegetation patterns in California for millions of years. There have been 4 fires in Reyes Peak project area since 1997. There were 58 fires within 2 miles of the project area since 1972. Little fires in here. Most of the fires were caused by lightning and campfires. The remaining were caused by equipment use, smoking, arson, or what we call miscellaneous or undetermined causes. Equipment use, smoking, arson count for 5, and the other 11 are categorized as miscellaneous use. So this is our current and desired condition that is driven in the forest plan. And Tom Lowell, our silviculturist, will give a brief overview of the vegetation management proposed for the project.
Well, I'm having mouse issues. There we go. Yeah, thank you, Catherine. My name is Tom Lowell. I'm the project silviculturist on the Reyes Peak project. Essentially, what we have out there is a densification issue on the forest, as it is throughout the Western United States these days. Through fire suppression, management activities, we've allowed the forests to become much more dense than they used to be. That's well documented in scientific papers throughout the West, and Reyes Peak area is no different. And as such, the basal area has increased across the project area, and this stresses out the existing trees. And so we are trying to reduce the density out there, reduce fuel ladders, and canopy bulk densities. So essentially, the area will be more resilient to drought, wildfire effects, insects, those types of things. We're cutting the smaller trees to reduce the fuel ladders. And we're essentially, people have been talking about, oh, you're cutting 2-foot trees. Well, yeah, we're proposing that up to 2-foot trees to save the 5-foot in diameter trees that are out there. That is part of our management direction. So once again, we're just reducing the density in the project area. And a lot of the areas we're going to be walking through because they're already at desirable densities. It's just pockets out there that are not. And you guys are going to be able to see that later when we show some other, I forget what it's called.
Thanks, Tom.
Excuse me. Okay. I thought you guys couldn't hear me. It said that my microphone was on mute, but.
I can hear you. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
I heard you the whole time. Let me let me get my slide here. Okay. Learning new technology as we speak. And I cannot get, okay, we're gonna have to do it the old way. Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. So that segue should have been a little bit more smooth, but the idea is Tom was, as you know, was explaining the proposal. We're moving from existing to desired. And as many of you have already read the proposal, you may know that we're going to create a variable width shaded fuel break. And those activities, after completed, will reduce the fuel loading on the forest floor. Vegetation would either be sold as a timber product or piled or burned. And we will be using prescribed fire as a standalone treatment, as well as removing hazard trees. So that was I wanted to have that a little more brief than the last couple meetings because you've heard the same thing now. You're well aware of where to go to understand the project. So we want to open it up. I'm going to open up to Greg, and I will stop sharing. And Greg Thompson, the project lead, will share his screen. There we go. Okay, so I should have stopped sharing there.
Yes, you did. And good afternoon. What I'm going to do is see if I can share my screen too. And let me know when you can see that, Catherine. Can you see it?
Yep, looks good. Looks great.
Great. This is just a starting point. You know, I'd love to be out with everyone on a field trip today, but since that's not possible, we're trying to embrace all kinds of different technologies, and including some of which I'm sure a lot of the folks on this call are familiar with, which is Google Earth. So basically, I have a Google Earth opened, and the white line here is the proposed project area that we're looking at. As you can see, Highway 33 is down here, and the project goes all the way up to Reyes Peak to the east. And then down towards the north is, I'll try not to go too fast for you, is the community of Camp Shydick down here, and also some, scattered ranches throughout the Coahoma River Valley in there. So we just want to kind of give folks kind of overview where the project was in relationship to Google Earth. And as we're discussing, there's areas that folks wanted to go look at specifically or to highlight, we can do that. As you can see, we're talking about a couple different areas for the project, starting from the westernmost boundary, predominantly this area in here. You get some big cone duck fir stands off towards the Highway 33 side and down here. These drainages in here kind of outside the project area. You'll see the chaparral in here. And you should be able to see this line right in here, and I'll scroll in a little bit faster, a little bit more there. That's the old dozer line we were talking about that has been used from previous fires. So we know we've been using this area, and that's part of why we're looking at this project too, is we've been using it on so many fires. this has just given us an opportunity to look at it before a fire to see how things are, and be able to analyze impacts and kind of have a good idea of what we want to do before a fire versus afterwards. As you keep heading east on the project, and I'll try to keep it slow here, it does change out of that chaparral. It gets a little bit more oak, and then it starts getting into the Jeffrey pine, white fir, and sugar pine stands. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, I think we even found a couple cedar trees out there, incense cedar, and they start popping in here. And as you keep going east on the project, you'll start seeing more of the Jeffrey pine, the white fir pop in until you get all the way out towards the end, towards Reyes Peak. But even up here, you'll see there's some difference. Here you really get the dramatic change. North side, you have all these conifer stands, and on the south-facing side, it's predominantly chaparral and some of the shrub oak, which in a lot of ways you'd expect. On the south-facing slopes, it's drier, it's harsher, and you tend to get more of the chaparral there. And on the north slopes, you get a lot of these conifer stands. So the other part of the project is what we're looking at is there's a lot of good conifers out here. There's a lot of good potential spotted owl and goshawk habitat, especially when you start getting down some of these drainages. So part of the purpose and need for the project is not only for the protection of the human habitation down here, but also the wildlife habitat out here. So with any shaded field break, we're not after stopping a fire, but modifying fire behavior. So if we get a fire in that area, hopefully we'll get a ground fire that's beneficial, that kind of helps maybe restore that area back into the natural fire regime, since we've been suppressing fire so long, and get some beneficial uses in it. When we talk about the fires in the area, we did have another fire, the pine fire. That fire, luckily the way it burned, we did see some beneficial uses in those stands that were in the wilderness. But other stands we saw, about 30–40% of it just take it out of a forested condition. So anything we can do what our proposal is looking at to help protect that, and we're looking for feedback from you today. So that's just kind of an overview from the sky view and Google Earth. And part of it, we wanted to open it up to conversations about the project. So, Catherine, did you want to take it?
Sure. Yep. At this point here, we'd like to open it up to the discussion. We can leave this visual on if folks want to ask questions of the areas, or mostly we would like you to open your mic, turn on your camera, and start the discussion with us.
Hi, this is Kip Callahan from the California Native Plant Society. I'm from the Channel Islands chapter, which is the chapter which covers Ventura County. Hi, how's everyone?
Good, thank you.
And so I'll paste questions into the chat as well, so that people can see those. So my first question is about the provision for removing trees above 24 inches if they're infested with mistletoe. And so I was wondering, what are the criteria for that? Does a single mistletoe constitute a candidate for removal, or is there some standard for infestation? And is there a technical document that's available that lays out those guidelines?
I'll take that one. Yeah, Kip, this is Tom Lowell. Yes, there is. It is, let me get the exact name of the document. I responded to an earlier comment. I don't know if you have it from the last meeting, but yes, there's a Region 5 hazard tree guideline document that speaks directly to mistletoe. And folks out there on the ground during implementation will be using that as a guide. I'm not extremely familiar with that because I'm not from Region 5, and Greg may be able to answer it more fully. But yes, there is a guide. It's the Region 5 Hazard Tree Guidelines, and they do have specific guidelines for mistletoe with respect to being a hazard tree. I don't know.
Okay.
I would assume that it's not going to be one broom, but I can't speak for that. Greg could, I'm sure, better than I.
Sure.
So just,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to clarify, so it's in regard to the hazard tree situation, and not there are other technical documents that I've seen from the Forest Service that talk about mistletoe specifically in terms of like timber production. And it's and there are some species that are classified as a forest pest within conifer systems as a result of that, as a result of the impacts to timber production. And so what I'm trying to get clarity on is, are you talking about removing hazard trees because they've become hazard trees because they're infested with mistletoe, or are there other guidelines and other criteria that may be used to remove mistletoe infested trees, even if there's not, because in the previous question and answer, you talked about removing hazard trees only if they would pose a hazard to crews that were thinning. And I'm just want to clarify that there aren't other criteria related to mistletoe that could lead to tree removal.
Absolutely. Let me help with this one a little bit too. So, and this has been a clarification. I'm glad you're asking this question today so everyone on the call today can hear. So when we're looking at our proposal as far as mistletoe, it comes down to danger trees and the fact that sometimes mistletoe can lead to structural defects in the tree and cause it to become a hazard tree. So if there's light broom on a tree and it's not causing it to be a hazard or causing any structural issues with the tree, the goal in there is not to go in and prune out all the mistletoe. In the past, some of the activity that has occurred on the Mount Pinos district is the previous forester used to have a program for removing mistletoe. And I believe this is one of the areas they actually went up and thinned and pruned the trees to try to reduce the infestation of the mistletoe from a forest health standpoint. But the project, we're going more from, the hazard point of it. But, that brings up some good other discussions too, is we have the stand out there, and as you know, mistletoe can be detrimental to a stand, and it can impact the younger stand too. So, we want to be looking at that from a forest health standpoint. But when we're talking about those larger trees, our goal is not to take them out. We want them out there. Those larger trees are part of that, the desired condition. We want to keep that. Half of our trees, if you look at our proposed action, are in that larger diameter class. We want to retain them. We don't want to remove them. And maybe, and there's some areas where unfortunately we've already had to fall hazard trees out in the project area because some of those bigger trees have succumbed to drought and Ips beetle killing them. So, and some of it, like when you're asking mistletoe, what would you like to see as far as mistletoe treatments, or if any at all? What's from your standpoint?
I think from our standpoint, we, and I'm speaking mostly from my perspective. I don't know how some of our other people might feel, but from my perspective, I would think that, the mistletoe are a native plant that's a natural part of these communities. And even when they do cause tree mortality, that's part of a normal process. And, there's wildlife that use, especially birds that are cavity nesters, that use snags and dead trees. And those mistletoe provide important food resources for wildlife as well. So I think, for us, we want to see that balanced. I could understand if there was removal of heavily infested trees, especially if they presented a hazard to work crews. But I certainly don't see the justification for removing trees that are lightly infested.
Okay.
Can I say something, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely, Tom.
Okay, yeah, and we're completely on board with you on that, Kip. the only reason they would be taken out is because if they are a hazard to work crews, if they're a hazard to the public, because remember, it's like some of these areas are right around campgrounds. This is not, taking them out because they would be detrimental to timber production at all. And also remember, this is going to be a shaded fuel break also. So when it comes to regeneration underneath it, there are anticipated to be subsequent follow-up treatments that would be removing those understory trees again to have this project be maintained as a effective fuel break. But no, to answer your question, it's not being taken out. We weren't going to go there. It's like it's got a hawk's worth of one, a couple mistletoe balls. No, it's if they're like loaded up with it and they're a hazard because of their location next to the road, next to a campsite, then they would be taken out. But honestly, we don't want to take out those bigger trees at all because they just cost more money to do it. Makes it a more expensive project. That's all I had to say.
Plus, this is desired condition. We want those larger trees. I think
We
most
need
of the public
snacks.
appreciates them, and I do too. And when we're talking about some of the younger trees that are going to come in, when we do our understory treatments, we're not taking out all the regeneration either. We want to make sure that there's regeneration out there to provide for future stand too. So with any project, it's going to be a balance between, okay, we want new recruitment to replace stuff we know we're going to lose naturally through mortality. Want to help just get it back in a nice mosaic kind of state, and healthy and be able to withstand the stressors. Because as you can understand, we've had drought, insects have come in, trees are weak, even though mistletoe infestation may not be bad, it still kind of weakens them. So, we're looking at all these different stressors, just trying to really look at how we can keep this stand there for the future. And that's the goal of this project. We want a forested stand. We want to be able to return, manage fire. We want to be able to help protect habitat. We want to ensure we get good growth on the trees so that they remain healthy. So, good discussion, and thanks for asking that question, Tip.
So I see a question in the chat. Rebecca, would you turn on your camera and ask that question that you have?
Can you see me?
Yes,
Yes,
yeah,
hi.
thanks, Rebecca.
And we can hear you.
Hi. Have the lines that you dosed within the project area been used for direct suppression or to attack fires or a single fire in the last 20 years?
Good question. They've all been contingency line for the other fires. So let me see if I can't share my screen again. So let me know when everyone can see the screen, if you don't mind. So can everyone see the screen? Can you see
We
the
can
screen?
see it, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So most of this has been contingency line. You'll see the main dozer line coming down here. You'll even see other dozer lines coming down here. These were originally put in, I believe, for the Zaka fire. If you look up in this area, this is the Zaka. They didn't think Highway 33 was going to hold the fire, so they were up here putting that in. And again, it was contingency line for the Thomas fire, which was, bear with me as I go too fast. Thomas fire was out in here. They thought it was going to reach this area and need it again, once again. Luckily with the Thomas fire, the weather changed, and as soon as we lost the Santa Ana conditions, we couldn't even get fire going once normal conditions going. Our prescribed fire wouldn't even work, luckily. So, and it's contingency lines in this area because it's one of the few areas that has a road. It's got a predominant ridge that can be effective to stop a fire. So that's why they put it in this area. So, and that's one of the reasons why we looked at it again. Is if they're going to repeatedly come back here, it's an opportunity for us to analyze it, maybe look at doing a shaded and and try to look at it maybe a different impact versus just coming in under emergency situations.
But it's never actually been used directly.
I don't think it's ever come to the line from what I can see, because at least for the portions in the project area, yeah. And I'm going to say, fortunately, it hasn't been used, because that means a lot of this area didn't burn up. But as you can see down in this area, it came close to where they thought they were going to need it, especially off the Zaka fire. Luckily, Highway 33 held, but it's pretty crazy to think that all that pavement they thought wasn't going to hold, but we've seen it jump that before. And I think in a couple areas it may have actually jumped Highway 33 a little bit. I know it did come up and it burned, Zaka fire burned over in this area here.
So according to your own assessment, though, of potential and existing fuel breaks in the southern Los Padres National Forest, this project ranks 119 out of 163 in terms of priority. So given the low priority, how do you justify your intention to use categorical exclusions to expedite? Why is it necessary to expedite this project by bypassing environmental review that's normally required under NEPA? For something this huge and in inventory roadless areas and proposed wilderness, can you explain that?
So why are we doing this project, right? And why are we doing it? Because the assessment has it as a different number, right? So
why are you doing it without environmental review? Why are you doing it without the full NEPA review that's normally required for a project that's this large and in inventory roadless area and in areas that are proposed for wilderness protection?
Okay, good questions. And why do you think we should be doing this project? That's a question.
Is that for me?
Yeah,
I think you should
absolutely.
do the project.
This is what this meeting's about. This is the NEPA process. This is a scoping process. This is collaborative. This is what you're seeing on these lines is just a project proposal. The whole point of these meetings is get your input too. I'll answer some of your questions, and then I'd love to hear your input too. But the fuel break assessment has it as a lower rank for fire. But when we look at projects and priorities, that's only one of the tools and one of the numbers we look at. So the other factor out here is the forest health. We know this area has been identified as a high risk for insect disease and mortality. So that brought it up a little higher on the list. We also know that these stands are susceptible and to fires. We know there's been fires out in the areas. So the other factor that brought it up higher on the priority list is all this area out in here. All this has really good potential habitat for species such as California spotted owl or California goshawk. And one of the things that we have seen California-wide, West Coast-wide, region-wide is a loss of habitat due to large-scale fires. I'm not saying that habitat won't come back, but it's probably going to take, up to 100 years for some of that habitat to come back. So we want to see that area protected also. And that's why another reason why it came up higher on the priority list. So yes, you're right. As far as the fuel break assessment that we've done internally, for that one factor of just fuel break and fuel breaks that have a higher chance for being at, that's one of the reasons why that project. Because there's also the forest health component, there's wildlife habitat protection component too. So that's why we're looking at this project in this location and at this time. And this project, it's been on the books for about 15 years. It was here predating me before I even started. I've been here about 13 years. We're finally just getting to it because we've worked on other areas first. We had some other priority areas with, again, forest health, insect, and fire, where some of our projects were ranked number 1, 2, or 3 on that list. This area, it's just become a priority, and it was a priority for the Ojai Ranger District. They really wanted to see it worked on. They really wanted to make sure that these campgrounds continue to have trees for people to enjoy, and they didn't want to lose that opportunity for folks. So, that's our starting point. That's where we're looking at the project. But again, we want your input, and we want input for others on this call of what they think or how you think this area should be managed or what criteria you're looking at. That's why we're here today. We'd love your input.
So I have some additional questions. The next one pertains to rare plants. And I was wondering if you guys can provide a list or have a list of the forest sensitive species which occur within the vicinity of the project. And I had some questions about how that data that exists within the Forest Service database compares to other known source of data like the California Natural Diversity Database and the California Consortium of Herbaria. Oh, you're on mute, Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you. So the botanist on the team, Christine West, is not here, but I can try to answer some of this. So we use the NRIS, the NRIS, the CNDDB, and the CCH, right? You probably know what those are.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. For those on the call, I think I know what the acronyms are. The California Native Diversity Database, is that right, Kim?
Natural Diversity Database.
Okay, and why don't you tell me what NRIS is and CCH?
I actually don't, I'm not familiar with NRIS, but CCH is the California Consortium of Herbaria.
Okay, so so we use those. So I think that was one of your questions, if we use those, right?
Yep.
And then surveys are were completed, as I'm quite sure. I think that's as far as they've gotten. We have not completed any reports on those. I know that's the case. There's a comprehensive list that's considered, and then the classic. If we have to do a BE or a BA, whatever occurs with when the botanist gets back on, as we move forward, we're still in the proposal phase. So ideally we have a boundary at this point, but we're still in discussion as of right now. So that's so all the species are looked at, T&E and sensitive. And yes, like you said, I said we use those databases. I think that answers the question.
But you don't currently have a list available of what species you expect to occur within the project vicinity?
Maybe Greg, can you? I can give you the list we look at. We have the forest list, and I don't have that right now this minute in front of me. I could get you that list.
I have the list of forest sensitive species. I'm just wondering what if you've identified candidate species which you would expect to occur, within the project area.
Yeah, we've started that process. We're not finished with that process because we're using all those different sources. They've used that to do the surveys. Some other, turn my camera on. Some of the other stuff that's going to happen is we have a new botanist on staff. So they'll be working with the enterprise team botanist, who's Christine West, who's done the work. Another individual, Justin Tufts, has done the survey work with a bunch of his crew. So, they've worked with Lloyd Simpson. We just don't have it all documented down yet because we're not going to finish a report because we're working with folks on scoping because, we're hoping that you have some information too and that you're able to say, hey, please consider this species or this species. Because there's stuff that comes up in the scientific community. There's new taxa that gets added and there's new stuff that cannot be on our list. And our new botanist, I'm sure, will be working with our retired botanist saying, hey, you're an expert in here. You've been here for 15, 20 years. What are stuff that comes up? Your group maintains an extensive list, I know. Those are another resources that can be used. And really, as part of this call and collaboration and scoping and finding out, what we're after, what we're missing, we love to hear from you. which you think we should be looking after too. Because we're not done. This is just, again, a proposal we're looking at, and we want to have that proposal take into consideration what we've looked at already, but also what others are bringing to the table. If you have some ideas on our management that we can meet our objectives, but also maybe can meet some of your objectives from your side or with land communities, please let us know right now, today, or in a letter. We're going to consider it. We're collaborating. Collaboration's ongoing. This is what we want from you. So,
Great, thank you.
yep, you bet.
Just to jump on the end of that, how can you say that the project area, this is Rebecca again, is too dense and move forward with the project approval if you've not completed your survey? We and other organizations have repeatedly asked you for stand data, and your response every time has been that you're still collecting and analyzing it.
And that's correct. We are still analyzing it. We're looking at the data, and as part of this process and part of the scoping is, we're seeing if you as the public are asking us to look at it in a different way. We're waiting to hear from you to see if, hey, we want you to do this. Can you please consider this? Please look at it. So, it's part of that and part of the data. It's our job to look at the impacts. It's our job to analyze it, but we also want to get input from the public. So that information will become available, but that typically won't become available until we're done getting our analysis. Our final analysis is complete. Our final reports are complete. And if we do find extraordinary circumstances, if we do find something that needs to be considered further, then that will be a tactical pause, and maybe we end up doing an EA. And at that time, that data will be made available when an EA comes out with our specialist report. So, but at this point in time, we're early on the process, and I kind of relate it to a little bit like doing a scientific paper. Those doing the paper, doing the research, we need the chance to look at the data, and in this case, look at the data in responses to the public's concern, so we can analyze it.
Well, in order to be collaborative, wouldn't we need to have the data as well? And if we can't provide input after the comment period is over.
So that's a good question, and I don't think it's necessarily an unfair question. It's just we have the raw data that we're still looking at, and then you do have the data as part of our proposed action too. So the data of what we have out there as far as trees per acre, of what the trees range, and we've even also provided some historical data from Weiselander plots that are part of our proposed action. So you have that information available to you also.
That plot that you cite, there's just one near the project area or very close to the project area, and it's like the size of a postage stamp. So if you are, as we all know, the tree density varies very greatly across Pine Mountain Ridge. And how, if you just use that one square and two squares from another place in an entirely different ecosystem, how can you be sure that you're looking at the correct data or a complete data picture?
That is a good question. And you want to know something? Part of that is the best data that we have from back in that time period. So, like, again, another part of this process is, do you have any data you'd like to point us to? Is there some research that you have, or some paper you would like us to look at, or some report, or some information that we're not aware of that will help us with this process? If you would have that, we would love you to help us with our analysis and help us through the process too. So,
we certainly will be submitting that to the comment period. We hope you use it.
Wonderful. Thank you for providing it. We appreciate it.
And I think, can you hear me, Greg?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I think you touched on Rebecca. Wait. No, that was sorry. that addressed another comment in the chat. Yeah, Kelly, or Audrey Kelly. Would you like to make a, did Greg address your comment?
Hi, can you guys hear me? Seems like my
Yes.
video isn't working.
That's fine.
Hi, I'm Audrey Kelly with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. This project just came up sort of recently, and we're trying to figure out the exact process of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act and how a project would be approved under this exemption. So from my understanding, you guys have to do the public scoping, receive the comment letters, and then I don't really understand what happens after that. So you sort of touched on a collaborative process and wanting to get information, but what do you guys do with that information, and where does the collaboration go from there?
That is a good question. So when we're looking at this process as far as scoping, if we have a general idea of a project might fall under the Healthy Forest Restoration Act and some of the categorical exclusions that were given to us as tools, we let folks know as part of the scoping that, hey, this is a project, this is what we're looking at, this is the proposal we have to look at, and then we're asking for information, one, from scoping, for folks to just put in their information, and two, for some of these collaborative meetings, so give folks an opportunity to either ask questions or even make suggestions on the project, or try to say, hey, you know, we'd rather see this, or can you consider that? So that's part of the process. So once scoping's closed, which will be on Friday, and we get all those comments, what we're going to do is take a look at all the letters that we received, all the information, and then we'll be looking for any significant issues and significant impacts. Now, if we find extraordinary circumstances, we'll look at them, analyze them, see if there's anything that we can mitigate to keep it out of significant impacts and keep it in the category, or potentially if we do find something that might lead to a significant impact, then we'll further analyze it in an EA. No decision has been made on this process. We're still early on, and we're still gathering information. So if we do find that there's no significant impacts, and we do our analysis, we look at our biological evaluations, our biological assessments for biology, wildlife, we conduct our heritage report, we look at other the inventory roadless rules and make sure we're meeting the criteria in the inventory roadless rules. We're making sure we're consistent with the National Forest Management Act. We're actually looking to make sure we're consistent with our land management plan guidelines. So we'll be looking at a lot of different aspects just besides this categorical exclusion and extraordinary circumstances checklist before any decisions made by the line officer. So, like I said, consider this part of it as just informational gathering. And, you know, if part of this request is from the public that they'd like to have more collaborative meetings after the close of scoping, there's nothing to say that that can't happen either. So if you'd like that feedback, please provide it to us. And like I said, you know, this is forest management that the Los Padres is going to be active on, and we have more projects that'll be in the future. So having collaboration and being able to work with individuals interested throughout this project and other projects in the future would be great. And then maybe Karina can jump in and talk a little bit about that also too, as line officer. That's if we didn't lose her.
Sorry, the clicking of the buttons take a little while. 1 second. Yeah, so Audrey, just to reiterate what Greg was saying is, you know, this is part of the process to engage in the community, the public, stakeholders, collaborators, just to come in and really see, is what we're proposing the right project in the right location, the right size, and gather more data and information. And if it's not, then we'll adjust boundaries, we'll adjust using the greatest and the latest science and data that we gather. So please continue to send it to us. The comment period does end tomorrow, but we'll continue to accept information and comments and even continue to have dialogue with all of you.
Great, thanks. I let's see, I want to try to honor these in order. David Zell, you had a question. Could you read that to all of us? Unless your name's Zell David, sorry. I can't tell.
It's David. It's David. Yeah, just wondering if there's been any similarly scoped projects of similar magnitude that have been implemented in the Southern Los Padres, and if so, was it a success? And what metrics will demonstrate success on this project?
No, that's a good question. Another project that was done that we're working on is the Fraser Mountain project. We looked at that one and analyzed it, and we've done some understory thinning on that project, and it's come up pretty well. We've also done some understory burning in the project, and we've had a little bit of mixed success with that being in drought. But so far, that's coming out well. What we're seeing is the project, when we analyzed that and looked at it, some of that criteria for that project was just to do understory burning, and we had a good test of that principle. We had one error where we called for only understory burning, and the grand fire happened. I think it was the grand fire, and the grand fire actually burned up into the project area where we wanted to do prescribed fire. And in that case, that fire hit that area, immediately went to the ground fire and did what we wanted. So that I considered a success because it helped validate our analysis, saying, hey, we didn't need to treat this area. It's already at desired condition. Only thing we need to do is understory burning. And that's similar to this project. When we're talking about the conifer stands out there, if you look at the stand, it's not a uniform dense stand. It's even our proposed action, we indicate there's about half of it that's at desired condition that we just really want to reintroduce fire, manage the understory fuels, so that way if we do get a fire, it keeps in that understory fire, keeps in that realm. And the other half is the stands we need to do the thinning. So I think for success as far as some of that. Now that other project, we were able to really reduce fuels. We weren't able to maybe thin it enough on the Fraser Mountain for insect and disease, but success is monitored over time. And when we're dealing with forestry and stands that live, for a very long time, we may not find whether it was success for 30, 40, 50, 60 years later. So one of the things we'll be doing is kind of keep analyzing it. A lot of times we revisit projects or have maintenance schedules built in to make sure we're keeping the metrics we want. And, as far as the Los Padres, that's kind of what we're looking at. Tom Lowell, who's our silviculturist for the project, the forester, he probably has similar experiences. And if you like, I'm sure Tom could add in a couple words to that also.
Yeah, I can. And to answer, I guess one of your first questions, David, is how we're going to measure success. The metric is density. And if we reduce the existing density in those thicker pockets, is what we're truly wanting to do to save or to try and make the residual larger trees more resilient. If we reduce it down to target basal areas and densities, and that's based on something that's called relative density, and there's a zone where you want to be to where your trees are not intercompeting with each other to the point where they're starting to create mortality and stress in the other trees simply because of density. Yeah, 755 acres. Actually, that's well, I can't speak for Southern California, but for the rest of the nation, that's actually small. And I know size doesn't matter in this. I mean, you guys live in Southern California, and so it's not really a factor. This project is actually pretty small, but if it's your project in your area, it's extremely important, and we're cognizant of that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Thanks.
Beth Newman, would you like to engage? Read your comment. Turn your camera on if it's working. If you can hear me.
It looks like your microphone's on mute, Beth.
I used to live in Camp Shidek, so it is an important community. There are many ranches. My husband, who passed away a few years ago, grew up in that area farming hay, and he came from an Italian farming community that was in Ventura, and they summered out on the Mount Pinos district all along in that area. It's not a community that's small in terms of its importance. It has a long, long history. So there are homes in the area. There is a community in the area. It's not, I don't think it's accurate to say that there's no important communities or people that, you know, that we know one who's impacted by fire, because there are homes and communities out there. And we support the project. It seems like standard forestry practice that's long overdue. We can cite many examples on adjacent forests where no forest management is done, and when fires happen, they're just too devastating. So I have seen many examples of forest health management in the spotted owl areas by the Columbia Gorge. I've done some field trips there with Society of American Foresters to learn and to understand basic forestry practices. We volunteer with the Forestry Challenge that teaches high school youth about forestry practices, and I don't find anything at all that's unusual or out of an everyday silvicultural prescription. So as maintainers and volunteers of this area, we all support this project and think it would be wonderful for advancing forest health in this area. That's about all I have to say.
All right, thank you very much. And then I see Kip, you have another comment, question?
Yeah, so my next question is about the chaparral mastication. So in the question answer session last time, it was mentioned that the purpose of the mastication is not to remove the chaparral, but to reduce the age class. I had a couple of sort of questions about that. So, and I'll just quickly say them and then let you respond. So can you just explain how the reduced age class will help meet the goals of the project? So is it for, is it a form of fuels reduction? And then how long is that age reduction want to be maintained? Does this mean you'll need to do periodic mastication to maintain the conditions you want? And then sort of the final piece is, you mentioned the reliance of, or basically that plan seemed to rely on chaparral resprouting. But I was wondering if you had stand data from there, because I've heard just anecdotal stories that a lot of the chaparral up there is composed of manzanita species, some of which are not sprouters, but are obligate seeders, which require fire conditions and things to regenerate. And so I was wondering what you expected the impacts to be on the vegetation communities there if you did this mastication, and if you could foresee potential type conversion from one type of chaparral community to another if you were masticating cedars and then expecting regeneration from sprouters.
You know, that's a very good question. As I know, the chaparral two type, the sprouters, you know, they'll come back. Obligate cedars, you know, they'll be out there. The seed will be out there, and they'll have a chance to come back too. But when we're looking at mastication, and maybe you can help with this too, is we're looking at mastication in a way that doesn't kill the plant, but still allows the vegetation to be there. Just mostly because we know the younger vegetation on the chaparral is more fire resistant. We've looked at a lot of stuff saying chaparral, you know, that gets to age 10 and beyond, it kind of burns the same as years 50 or 60. So our goal here is, you know, I guess the other part of it is we do talk about and probably stress the habitat of owl to the north is, but on that same point, there's a lot of chaparral habitat on the other side to the south. So we're looking at managing this area, trying to keep it in chaparral, but in an age class that's less flammable. We're going to be looking at, as you mentioned, we don't want to type convert, but there's a chance for noxious weeds. So we're going to have to look at noxious weeds assessment on how we manage it. But our other goal too is the chaparral ecosystem to the south. We don't want to see that burn either. And I think we also have seen a lot of these chaparral ecosystems, especially over towards the more interior chaparral ecosystems, get burned repeatedly, and then we're type converting at a massive scale. So it's a balance here, and I'm hoping people see on this project that it's a balance between a lot of different needs and a lot of different issues on a lot of different species, and trying to find that right prescription is what we're doing here now. We don't. The goal isn't to type convert, of this project. We don't want that. So if you have some stuff that can help us with, if you're aware of different techniques or different papers or different information that, hey, maybe you can try this type of mastication, or maybe don't do all mastication, but maybe just hand cutting. Because I think hand cutting, sometimes we get more vegetation back that way. Or if there's some different techniques you can help us with, or even with our footprint, that's what we're after here. So, like I said, I wish I had a golden answer to you, but to be honest with you, we're in scoping and we're trying to find that answer that's going to work out here. I can tell you, I do know there's a lot of live oak out there in that chaparral area, and we know in general there's different, the canyon live oak versus scrub oak. I think one of the things we can do is just focus on making sure the canyon live oak stays, because whether that's the younger or older stuff, and it tends to be a little bit more fire resilient. And so that's something we definitely keep in the mix. And we'll even potentially look on how we masticate. The goal isn't to masticate everything out of there. We can look at getting to different percentages of mastication. So that's something we need to look at. Or, we have a dozer line out there. So we already know that's there, that's been impacted. So maybe we can look at get a chance to look at a feathering effect. So, maybe on the dozer line, we keep that as it is, but feather it out to 50% treatment, and as we get towards the edge farther out, get towards a certain percentage there. So that's something we can look at. And like I said, we really want your feedback on how to manage that chaparral to keep it. Because the other aspect, we're trying to keep the big picture. It's just the impact we're going to impact chaparral is, we do know fires are having a big impact on chaparral, especially for repeated burning. And we have seen type conversion happen to grass. And if you go into different areas, luckily not on the LP, but maybe on other forests in San Bernardino, we're seeing the type conversion, the grasses come in, and then with the air pollution and the nitrogen deposition, that it's staying grasses. So, we have the chaparral ecosystem. We are a national forest, but we manage the land, we manage the ecosystems we have here. And we're looking at, okay, where can we go have footprints to help protect the whole ecosystem? And there's thousands of acres to the south. There's also the other areas that with the big conduct embedded in it that we don't want to see burned too. So again, some of it comes down to the strategic locations, even though this one for fuel break in a sense is as high as some other areas. It's because of these other characteristics we're looking at it too. So I mean, I'll let you, if you have anything you'd like to add on that too, as far as chaparral.
Yeah, I think mostly what I'm trying to do now is just get clarifying questions so that we can address a lot of this stuff in our comment letter. I think it's mostly too complicated to do in a format like this. And so I really appreciate the feedback that you're giving us, because I think that some of the issue we had with the proposal, it was really hard to understand, what was actually being proposed and what some of the long-term goals were. So that's the main objective for asking these kind of questions.
That's a lot what this process is for, and there's going to be some cases where our managements, due to fundamental value differences on how we like to see things managed, maybe different, but what we're trying to come to a consensus to, and I think everyone here will agree, that's a beautiful stand that we want to see on the landscape for the future. Is we're just looking at how we can do that to maintain it and protect those other values. So your input, your responses, your comments from everyone on this call is important. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kip. Sometimes we're guilty of talking government language or scientist language. So these public meetings are really just to make sure that we're talking in normal everyday language so everybody could understand. So your questions are incredibly valuable and I appreciate them.
Thanks.
So we got a couple questions. Kip, can we get Rick and Beth, and then we can come back to you, because I see you have another question plopped right in there too.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, great. So Rick, you got a question there. It kind of ties in with the next one with Beth. So I'll just quickly read it because we're getting a little close on the 90 minutes. Is there a potential start date for this project, and will you need volunteers? And Beth, yes, and you have volunteer fallers. Sounds like you're already out there already. Greg, for timing, we have a long process to go through. The review process will take a bit of time in itself. We have to get through that hurdle, see where we're going with the decision, inform the decision, see where we're going with the decision, and then we have the whole next to get through is how are we going to implement. So timing, Greg, we have no idea. If everything went well next year, as in we don't have fires and the whole team goes off on a fire, we don't have a situation where we have to somehow stop working because it's October 1st. Doubt that will happen, but
Sure. We have plans, but we don't ever have final plans because a lot of it's based on priorities, budgets, fires that comes in. You know, we've had fires come in and have shifted our whole priorities for about a decade. You know, if we start seeing stand loss from a fire, and now we're also looking at reforestation concerns, stuff like that. But in general, like I said, we'll just start the scoping stops on Friday. We'll be taking this information. We'll be looking at it. We'll be looking at the inventory wilderness areas. We'll be preparing information for internal review on what we're planning and proposing to do. We'll have our specialists look at it. So if we're hopefully by the end of the calendar year, we might have a decision on this. But it'll just depend on how much information we go through, or like I might disappear on a fire, like we've had a few other team members disappear, so that might change. And as far as implementation, we just this last week finished up completing a first round of owl surveys. I don't want to get one more for next year, so I'd like to have all those done for 2 years before we even think about implementation on this project. So we're still working on that. Karina?
Yes, so I just wanted to add, just from a forest scope. So we are responsible with managing 1.75 million acres of the Los Padres National Forest. So we do try really hard, our very best at identifying timelines to really leverage our appropriation that's given to us from Congress. We have a responsibility to all of you as taxpayers to ensure that we're getting the most efficient, effective work done with the funds that we have. So we have this responsibility between balancing that out with an international pandemic like we're dealing with right now, or like type 1 large fire incidents. So it's really challenging, and we try really hard at identifying our target dates, timelines to get work done. For the sake of making sure that we're being responsive, to the land, to the public, and making sure that we're not still looking at this project or similar projects like that 10 years later and say, oh, remember when we thought about doing that, but we never got around to it. So it's just this balancing act that we really try to work towards. It's not perfect, but we do have that fiscal responsibility as well as the land management responsibility.
Okay, could the guest who wrote in, I understand the concept of saving larger content, can that guest turn on the camera and speak up? That was thank you.
I didn't quite hear my name's Tom Mulroy, and I wrote a comment that doesn't seem to be attributed to me, but I really am confused about the NEPA compliance on this project. The website seemed to say you were going with a categorical exclusion, and yet the scope of what you're doing, the acreage, and it has to be kept into mind that that's not 755 acres of a much larger landscape that's homogeneous. This is a 755 acre ridgetop that rises above all the surrounding terrain, which makes it a much more unique and limited resource. Anyway, I think this needs at least an environmental assessment for NEPA compliance, and to have had, I understand you're doing some spotted owl surveys, but really pretty comprehensive surveys and a biological evaluation / biological assessment to be done. And it's not clear that that's going on, and certainly with a KTEX or you call it a CE, that means basically nothing instead of compliance. So I just want to raise that flag. It's an important project. You have important objectives, but it does have fairly strong and striking physical effects on a piece of landscape that's fairly unique out there. Even though you have thousands of acres under your purview, there aren't many Reyes peaks in your realm. So that's my my comment.
Thank you.
Sure. And did you want to, and that's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of the misconception out there, if you use plain language or we're doing a categorical exclusion, and the impression is, hey, it's categorical exclusion, we don't have to do anything. We're not even doing NEPA. Well, and that's actually truly not the case. Think of, and NEPA needs to be thought of like in a multi-step process. We have been getting categorical exclusion exemptions, and some of them come from Congress, and some of them come from internally from us doing certain types of projects. And we've done analysis on those certain types of projects, and we've seen time and time again they just don't rise to any significant impacts. So that's why some of those tools are there. And in this case, with the HEFRA authority, the Healthy Forest Restoration Act CE authorities we're looking at, it does give us guidelines we need to go by, and it does include an acre limitation of maximum 3,000 acres in this case. But with that, we still are going to be doing a biological evaluation for biology, for botany, and we'll be doing archaeological evaluation for cultural and heritage sites too. Those are going to be going on. I didn't know if you noticed all our team members on this team, but we also have a scenery specialist, Nicole Hill. We also have a hydrologist on here, Chad Hermerdorfer. Sorry if I got your last name wrong, Chad. And then we also have Tom Lowell, a silviculturist. So we have quite a few people looking at this project from all these different aspects to, even though it says categorical exclusion, that we're going to give it that hard look. And if we're doing this hard look and we think, hey, we might have a significant impact, then we do an EA. And then at that point, after we do an environmental analysis, if we got to that step and we said, hey, we're going to have significant impacts, and it's at that point, if you do an EIS, an environmental impact statement, then it's at that point we're actually telling the public, hey, we're having an impact on this ground. We're going to have impact. This is what they're going to be. We think that this project outweighs any of those impacts, we'll try to mitigate them. So we're actually, from our standpoint, hoping that when we look at a project, we keep it back in a CE realm, because that means we're not finding any significant impact. You know, we're looking at extraordinary circumstances, such as, you know, endangered species, threatened species, and we want to keep it in that realm. So we know we're not having significant impact. But if we think we do, we'll look at it at the next level. And that's part of this process and scoping is about, is helping us. We have an idea of what's out there. We've done some preliminary analysis. We've done preliminary surveys. We haven't fully analyzed it, but we're looking for information from the public too. And I have received information from the public that's been critical. I found that certain species that have been in the areas that we didn't know about, and we're like, thank you. We now know about it. We now can analyze it, or we can now say, hey, okay, can we mitigate it? Or, okay, is it maybe something we don't want to do that portion of the project, or modify things? So that's what this process is about. And I don't want the impression to be out there that we're just saying, hey, CE walking away, because it's anything but. You know, even before we get to this process, you know, we're looking at things. We're looking at our overall layers. We're looking at, you know, potential issues before we even get here. We're trying to actually weed some of them out before we get here, but we're not going to get them all. That's why public participation it is needed, because why we're an agency that has a lot of good information and background information. I don't think there's any specialist on this call who can't say that, hey, they haven't received good information from the public that's been beneficial. You know, if it's hydrology, sometimes it's like, hey, I got a domestic water supply in this area and it's the main water source for me. Yeah, we want to know about that. Or, hey, I don't know about this, but you guys said the species doesn't here, but I got a game camera on my back porch that shows it's here. You know, we've had things like that happen. So, like I said, I don't want the impression to be out there that we're not looking at it. And if there's more things you want us to look at, we really, really want that input. That's what we're here for. We're investing a lot of our time into this because it's important for us to invest our time and invest our time with the public in this process. So, like I said, for you and others, if you have anything, let us know. Because you're right, you made a good point that we're going to note down here. You're right. There's 1.75 million acres, but there is just one Reyes peak. You know, and this is an area that a lot of people use, and we know that. We understand the value of that, and I think that's why our project is being proposed, and so we can help protect those values that you and others are interested in. And Karina, you have a couple other comments?
Oh, not in regards to Mr. Thomas's question. I just wanted to hop on just to do a quick time check. So we were scheduled to go 90 minutes. However, I feel like this is the most collaborative, most engaging virtual meeting we've had to date. So I don't want to cut us short. So I would love to invite you guys to stay on the call, continue to engage with us. I think there's a hard stop of 2 hours after that, then everybody is dropped off due to the system, not due to us. So for those of you who want to continue in this dialogue, please stay on. We have a couple comments and questions that we still want to get to. And then for those of you who joined us and who have some pressing matters, thank you again for joining. As I mentioned earlier, this is an ongoing process. We're going to continue to engage with you. And before I lose some of you, I did want to answer Rebecca's question regarding tribal consultation. So yes, we are in government to government consultation with our tribal members, and that's something that's ongoing, and that's something that we're having directly with them. So that's all the information I could provide you with right now. It's some really good, thoughtful conversations and recognition and respect for a lot of the cultural and historical significance of the land. So we do recognize that. All right. So I did want to head over to sorry, let me find my spot. Aaron K, are you still on? I think we might have missed him. Oh, he's still on. Did you just want to hop on and chat with
Yeah,
us?
sure. I mean, probably a bit of what I would have asked about has been addressed, which was kind of regarding the environmental assessments and the biological resources. And I would say at least some of my concerns have been allayed on the project, but I'd still like to express that beyond, I mean, it makes mention of northern goshawk, spotted owl, California condor, but beyond that, I feel like the project doesn't really address wildlife and specifically avifauna very much. And I was just curious about measures to minimize impacts during breeding bird season.
Hi, this is Catherine Malengo. I'm the wildlife biologist assigned to the project. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Catherine.
Good. Yeah, so as you know, as you heard, we will be completing a biological evaluation and potentially a biological assessment for sensitive species. I also want to let you know that the Los Padres National Forest has completed a programmatic migratory bird report for fuel projects. That is a fairly recent document. It's been done in the last few years. So I will be taking a look at that to see what types of mitigation measures have been proposed in there for projects. And I also would like to ask you, do you have a specific species that you're interested in?
Not necessarily. I suppose in regards to avifauna, my two biggest concerns would be, I mean, there's kind of been some discussion of chaparral mastication and type conversion. So one potential concern would be if great horned owls were to kind of increasingly start habitating more into the spotted owl. I mean, obviously, one of the goals of the project is to enhance spotted, or not necessarily enhance, but yeah, enhance, but also protect spotted owl habitat. But then if you kind of, if a byproduct is maybe spotted great horned owl habitat increases, you might have some conflicts there. And then beyond that, it would just be kind of some of the more standard, unique, well, not necessarily unique per se, but things you only get in that area kind of in regards to Ventura and Santa Barbara County, things like green-tailed towhee, some of the woodpecker species. So yeah, I don't have that list off the top of my head at the moment, but I mean, just to name a few, like brown creeper, green-tailed towhee, some of those montane birds that you really got to go up there to see if you want to see them in Ventura County.
Okay, well, I've made a note of your comment, and I will make sure that we address it in the analysis.
Excellent. Yeah, and I plan on submitting a comment tomorrow via letter, and also I know some of the Audubon societies are providing input.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Catherine.
Alrighty. So I'm gonna head over to Jared McLeod, president of Point Magoo 4x4, and then after that I'll be heading back up to Jim Blakely, to Rebecca August, and then over to Kip. And if I've missed you, please put it in the chat box. I'm trying to put like buttons. So Jared, are you still on the phone?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
My name is Jared McLeod. I'm the president of Point Magoo 4-Wheel Drive Club. We do adopt-a-trail work through Los Padres National Forest and have our own adopt trail. I would have to say that our club is in full support of increased fuels management through the forest. I think it's more critical now than ever as far as preventing these devastating wildfires like we had with the Thomas Fire, and then now what we have going with the Lake Fire. I think fuels management should absolutely be a top priority. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Jared. Okay, so Jim Blakely, I believe you're next in line. You said that you don't have a microphone. Is that correct? Okay. And just in case everybody's wondering, we lost Catherine for a bit. She wasn't feeling very well, so you'll have me stepping in. Okay, so Jim Blakely says, when would this project be implemented and how long would it exclude public use of the area?
So, yeah, that's a good question. So, we don't really want to exclude public use in the area. So one of the things we could potentially do is we usually have hard closures on our gates. So that's something we can consider of trying to do the implementation, especially if we're falling trees near the roads. During that time, during normal closures, you know, if we have a little bit of snow on the road, we could probably handle it and doing it during those times. We've done that in other areas. Some of the time if you do mastications, we don't want anyone within 300 feet of a masticator because they do tend to throw out debris. So we'll be looking at that as far as safety issues, but we'll try to coordinate as far as this will be a little bit of a challenge too, because once we do our assessment, we might find we have limited operating periods where we might want to institute. So we're going to have to balance it with that. Balance it with public use, balance it with potential snow in the area. So we'll take those balances in, but we'll try not to have any closures. And if we do have closures, our goal is to get those closure notices out as far as advanced as possible, so that way people know and get it widespread as we can. But the way I've worked projects in the past, and I've worked quite a few across the forest, is my goal is not to have closures unless it really is a safety issue to the public. And then it's going to take close coordination and limiting any closure to the smallest amount of time possible. You know, if we're not doing work up here, I want you out there.
Hey, Greg, can you hang on? I just want to get Jim's previous comment that I wasn't able to get to. So he did say that one small plot seems completely inadequate as guidance for setting target forest densities in a diverse environment. Is that only info used to define desired density, or does it include forestry best practice experience?
Good question. So we are fortunate to have some Wiselander data out there, stuff that was collected in the 1930s. There's one plot that's actually in the project area, but there's a few more plots that are outside. I believe we use some of the Fraser Mountain plots as a reference, because also ties in with some of the research our own forest province ecologist has done in the area with her research paper as far as departure from past densities. So that is just a snapshot in time with the best information we have from then. But the information we collected from our stand exams and the scientific literature out there are the other driving force as far as what drives the purpose and need of the project. And from our preliminary analysis, you know, we're seeing that half the project probably won't need much thinning at all, which is great. It's closer to desired condition that we want to keep it to. And then the rest of the data based off densities, what we know based off of the scientific papers that have been done, especially with bark beetle, ips beetles, the density levels and mortality. We'll be using the current research to help us with that. And that's a good point. People look at that data and they think, oh, there's only one plot or a couple plots that we're using. And I would rather have those plots to give us some idea what was out there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have anything. But then again, like part of this process too is if you know of better data or if you know some data that we don't have, please let us know. We'd like to use that as a comparison, because if there's something out there that shows us that, well, no, really, it was something different, we want to know. So good question. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. I did miss one more comment. Rick just left us, but he did say thanks for the discussion. Unfortunately, I need to go now. Personally, I think the projects like this are important to consider and can be very positive for the areas involved. Thank you, Rick. Sorry we weren't able to get to you in time. So Rebecca, did you want to come back up? I see I missed a couple of items that you listed. I just want to make sure that we get your voice back in the room.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to first go back to what Mr. Thompson just said about, about plots. And he said that one of the plots was within the project area, and I believe that is the one that's near the project area is outside of the project area. And also, you didn't mention that they're 0.2 acres, these plots. So they're extremely, extremely small. So basing forest health and tree density on plots that are of that size seems a bit uncertain. And I should hope that a thorough environmental assessment would be undertaken with in lieu of real data. And then I wanted to ask about the 2016 pine fire that burned in similar vegetation, and it hadn't burned in 80 plus years, and only 4% of that 800 acres of mixed conifer burned at high severity. And how does that fit into your what you're saying about forest health and the need for this project, and how high intensity fire is such a threat to the ecosystem?
Sure, and I'd love to have Tracy Buell on the call, but she's not here today because she's our fuel specialist. So I will try to do the best I can, and because she'll be giving it more analysis. And like any fire, even the pine fire, when it burned out there, it all depends on how the fire burns through a stand. You know, if you have a fire come up over the ridge top and get to a ground and do a ground fire underneath, it does beneficial uses. I did take a look at that pine fire. I know some of it did have beneficial uses. I've talked to our firefighters who overflew it afterwards in helicopters, and they were saying, hey, some of this looked great. A third of it, they said, got hit pretty hard, took it into a deforested conditions. And that's something we'll look at as a comparison. But with any fire, it's how that fire goes through the stand. You know, if it lines right and you get certain weather conditions, you get certain wind conditions, that whole result can be different. No project that you're going to do is going to be able to mitigate for every wind condition, every wet weather condition. And the example I kind of pointed out too is the Thomas fire. You know, that thing under certain conditions raged across the front country. As soon as that weather pattern changed, from what I understand, they tried to burn some of that areas off to tie in the lines. They couldn't even get it to ignite. So, you know, what we want for those stands is if fire gets into those stands, we want to get in there and be a beneficial fire. So, and then as far as some, the other aspects, the plots and stuff, you know, we did put our own plots out there. We are looking at it, and we're looking at existing densities. And Tom, did you have any information you'd like to add in about plots and stuff like that? These are other silviculturists for the project. You want to jump in, Tom?
Yeah, I do. You mentioned that it's 0.2 acres. Well, that's a fifth of an acre, and actually for a stand exam plot, that's pretty big. And also, we're not basing it just on one plot or three. Now, the entire west of the United States has been undergoing densification for over 100 years since we started putting out fires. It's just, you know, that has been documented a lot with peer-reviewed papers. I mean, it's just what's going on. And Reyes Peak is no exception to that. And so, and not besides the papers that are out there, it's like we're trained foresters also. I mean, we walk through there and we're looking at the conditions of the forest, and we see what's dying. We see the trees that are under stress, and we're pretty sure we know why they're under stress. It's a combination of density with drought. It's getting hotter. I mean, climate change is happening, and we're just trying to keep those trees like the white pine and the Jeffrey pine on the site and as resilient as possible for as long as possible. And one of the primary ways we have to affect that outcome is through reduction of the density. It's like thinning your own garden. The residual trees grow better, and that's our whole point.
Thank you, Tom. Rebecca, did you have anything else?
I had another question about Native American resources. There's no reference at all to any field survey for cultural resources and no engagement of Chumash interests and concerns. And there was a letter to the editor in the Ventura County Recorder today from a representative from the Barbareño Veterano tribe, and I'm wondering why, if why there wasn't any reference to a field study, and whether you're going to you're prepared to address concerns beyond whatever legal obligation you have to work with recognized tribes.
We are absolutely meeting our legal requirement to work with federally recognized tribes, in addition to those folks and individuals who are not federally listed. So at times, and I don't know the letter that you're talking about, so it kind of worries me, because in order to work with that individual and see what proper mitigation measures might be in place, that dialogue needs to happen. So I will tell you that I am in conversation and in formal consultation with tribal members at the moment. And so out of respect for them, those consultations need to occur government to government. I don't know if I have any tribal members or tribal governments in the meeting today, but I would ask you to maybe identify yourself in the comment box, just so we could make sure we get to you in the next 15 minutes. But yeah, Rebecca, I hope that letter does make it in our comment period, or it has made its way over to us. We have received quite a bit of communication. Okay, I hope that answered your question. I'm gonna get over, if it's okay, I'm gonna go hop over to Kip and then Connor, and then we'll circle back to you if you have any other questions or comments.
Okay, so I think most of the parts of my previous question had been addressed around the historic density and proposed density outcomes, but I just wanted some clarity where in the historic data that was presented, most of the trees fell below 24 inches, something like 83%. And in the proposed outcomes for the project, most of the trees that would remain after treatment are above that size class. And I was wondering if you could just speak to that kind of inconsistency, and if it's mainly because the goals of the project are towards fuels management. And just even if you have anecdotal, something anecdotal, you could speak to this about what that means for forest composition from a species standpoint. So, is the end product forest species composition going to be substantially different from that historic data that you were citing or not? Because I know at least some of the tree size data or tree size class has to do with species composition, because you have firs that occur in the understory and stuff. Just wondering if you could clarify that for me.
Yeah, Greg, I'll take this one. I have already responded to your comment in writing, and hopefully you'll get it soon.
Okay.
But essentially what we're doing is we're trying to meld the forest health and the fuels aspects together. And from a forest health, it's a density issue. So whether I have my density in larger trees or in younger trees, the density is, for the most part, this is a generalization, density is density. And if I remove the smaller trees, to remove the fuel ladders and to break up the crown bulk densities, how tight the crowns are to affect fire behavior, that's what we're after. And so the project is not to mimic the historical stand structure, because we can't do that very well and maintain and meet our fuels goals. So we're removing, like I said, those ladder fuels and reducing the density. Also, you know, you're talking about later cereal species, you know, like true firs that are coming in underneath, that are some of the are well represented in the understory. We did not take that into account. We're just looking at density and structure from a fuels standpoint. Density for forest health, structure for fuels.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's one other thing I'd like to add too is, and that brings up an interesting question. You know, no forest stand is the same over time. Things are changing, things are growing, and we do have some fire history on there, but we also didn't go back to the past. I mean, over 100-year fire history that could have impacted the stands in the time too, because we know the Matilahaw fire and a few other fires happened, you know, at the turn of the century that impacted that area, would have maybe set that stand into a younger age class than it was beforehand. We understand some of these changes just happen normally over time too. So, and that's the thing about forests too, is, you know, they're around a long time, and it takes a long time for things to change too, and nothing's really static, and you know, those forest ecosystems are changing, and densifications has happened. It's happened over time because some of the natural fire has been eliminated from the system, and some of this younger generation that has come into some of the stands wouldn't normally be there. We just really don't want. You know, there's another comment I received too, and on the other aspect of things is when we do the fuels part is, well, what about your regeneration? Well, we don't want to get all the regeneration out of the stand there, because we want to make sure we have something to do. And that's the challenge of maintaining the forest, maintaining the fuels, maintaining species diversity, maintaining habitat. And a lot of stuff we look at too is, you know, some of the way we implement this or look at it is, okay, we have a fuel break, we have different widths. Maybe there's some areas where we want to leave a little bit more densification for wildlife issues. Or maybe we want to have little pockets over here, or, you know, just to have a little denser pocket of younger stand. But that will still meet the fuels, you know, fuels needs, forest health needs, protecting habitat needs, also, you know, other understory species, plant species. We're introducing prescribed fire in some of these areas. We're hoping maybe, you know, some other species come in too. You know, since fire's been missing, there might be some plant communities that reemerge back on the mountain that haven't been there in a while because we haven't been doing understory burning. There might be some plants that have been, you know, they're in the seed set for 90 years. Maybe they'll come back, and that's a good thing for us too, for management. So hopefully that helped with your questions. And Karina, are you able to jump on the next question?
Yes, I actually wanted to bring Catherine back on. She has a couple of questions and comments. So I was hoping that maybe, I see that you answered it in the chat box, but maybe if you could come back on video and just share with folks.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you at the end there, Karina. It's answered in the chat pod, but.
Oh, if you could answer it over video and microphone, please. You had some conversations going with Connor and with Aaron, and I just want to make sure that the folks that are calling in only or have audio only also get that information.
I see. Okay, so Connor had written a comment here about in response to the migratory birds discussion that I had earlier with Aaron. Connor wrote some particular bird species that they think bear consideration, including flammulated owl, northern saw-whet owl, white-headed woodpecker, red-breasted sapsucker, pygmy nuthatch, mountain chickadee, brown creeper, and green-tailed towhee. Their comment says all of these species are restricted within Ventura County to at most 4 conifer-covered mountain peaks, 3 of which, including Pine Mountain, have already been scheduled for logging. And then Aaron asked if I could provide the name of the document that I cited, the migratory birds report that's done was done on the forest, a programmatic document. So I will actually give you the entire title here. Los Padres National Forest Programmatic Migratory Birds Report for Fuels Treatment Projects, including Brazil Ranch, Monterey Strategic Fuel Break, Abbott Lakes, Lake of the Woods, CDZ, Fraser Park, CDC, Fraser Mountain, Figueroa Mountain, Santa Barbara Front Country, and Ojai Community Defense Zone, sorry. So let's see here. And then I went on to say that even though it does not specifically mention Reyes Peak in the title, I could see us tiering to that analysis because we do have, it does address some similar habitat types. However, we would also address any site-specific concerns similar to what Aaron mentioned earlier about chaparral, the treatment of chaparral, and how that could impact habitat for great horned owl and the type of dynamics, the change in dynamics between great horned owl and California spotted owl, potential changes.
Thank you, Catherine. That was some good dialogue that was happening among the 3 of you. So I'm gonna have, I think we have time for one more person who we haven't heard from, and then we're gonna go ahead and wrap up today's virtual meeting. Stephanie, would you like to hop on the camera, on the microphone, and join us? I see you've made a couple of comments. I just want to make sure your voice is in the room. Alrighty, I see your camera slowly loading. Is your microphone on? Okay, it shows that you're not on mute. Do you want to try to say something? My mic is on. Okay. Okay, sorry about that, Stephanie. Let me see if I find your latest topic. So Stephanie does say that Reyes Peak is beautiful, park-like forest. She does mention that the area is not dense. It's seriously beautiful, open park-like forest. She's worked in really dense forests, and this is not it, I think. And is there anything else I missed from Stephanie? Can you please address the current scientific consensus surrounding invasive species impacts this project will have and how you will mitigate? Fire breaks are a major conduits of dangerous weeds into remote areas, which, contrary to your goal, may increase the flammability of this area. Greg, will you be able to hop in?
Yeah, sure. This is where, unfortunately, fires and missing a couple of people. I'd love to have Christine West on. You know, fire can happen in whatever vegetation type you have out there. And if you look at any goal for any shaded fuel break, it's not to eliminate fire. It's to change fire behavior. And one of our key critical areas for fires is to reduce fire to where it's to about a 4.5 foot flame length. And that's something of a size that a hand crew can manage. So, you know, when folks talk about other material going in there, it's you know, you maybe got grasses in there. I would hopefully love to see, if we got grasses, I'd like to see the native bunch grasses in there, you know, which are resilient to fire, and you know, other grasses, you know, typically, you know, they're a light flashy fuel, yes, but they're also, you know, are going to give us that 4.5 foot flame length. So what we're going to do on this project, and what we do for every project, is we're going to be looking at, okay, this is what we're going to do, this is what's going to potentially come in there, and we're going to come up with our strategy to help with invasives. So, you know, given the need that we've seen, you know, if you have some techniques that can help us work with potential invasives that might come in, or you found other ways of helping, you know, mitigate that, or there's some information you have, we'd like to hear that. So that's really your chance to jump in to help us out. So again, part of this process is we'll try to give you the best of what we have, but we would love to hear from you. And you know, if say you may not necessarily agree with that part of the project, if there's things you see that can help us mitigate those, please help us out. You know, please direct us either to research that can help us out with that. We'd like to see it.
Thank you, Greg. And so I just wanted to invite Beth to hop back on the camera and mic, and then we'll close out our meeting at that.
Well, I was just adding in regard to the comment about that area being open. It is rather shady with tall trees. It looks extremely open compared to the other areas, including when you take the Reyes Peak Trail and you keep going down toward Haddock, then it becomes extremely dense. But I think that if you think about the perspective of what might that dense area have looked like before it became as dense as it was, it likely looked just the way that the forest looks now in the areas that don't have recent fire history. So I think that if you're creating mitigation measures for fire and you're reducing the ladder fuels, you have a greater chance of preserving the way that it looks now with the tall trees than if you were to leave it unmanaged. You have a larger possibility that it's going to look like those dense areas further down that trail.
Thank you for that comment, Beth. And one thing that we haven't touched on today, but I just want to make sure that we didn't close the meeting without mentioning it, is like when we're putting in contingency dozer line, we're also keeping in mind firefighter safety, first responder safety. If as district rangers, agency administrators, and incident commanders for fire organizations, we're having to make decisions as to, is that point of contact, is it safe to put firefighters there? And if it's not, then we have to, you know, push the line even further back. So let's just keep remembering them as well, and the community surrounding them. Like Beth shared, her family is from the surrounding community. So thank you all so much for joining on today's virtual meeting. It seemed like this technology worked, so that's exciting, with the exception of Stephanie, but I'm glad that you were still able to chat. As I mentioned earlier, this meeting will be available on our website. You'll be able to see the video and also the audio portion and closed captioning. Thank you again. I promise you, collaboration does not end here. We'll continue to engage with you, continue to talk with you. I see some really good, thoughtful conversation happening with Connor and Catherine over on the side, and Kip, and thank you guys so much. You guys enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Take care.